What's up everyone? Alex here. I know you're here for Elden Ring, but let me set the table here for a brief moment. In 2021, I had the privilege of becoming a Bandai Namco creator, which I am both extremely grateful and thankful for. This fateful event allowed me to play through and review two games, Scarlet Nexus and Tales of Arise, with both becoming my favorite games that year. But I knew that by covering these games, I couldn't just keep quiet until the next games came out. And I especially couldn't just ignore Elden Ring, one of the most highly anticipated games of 2022. I'll be honest, Elden Ring was a game that I quickly dismissed as something that just wasn't for me. After all, I had tried on several occasions to try and beat the Cleric Beast and Father Gascoigne in Bloodborne, only to have skated by the latter with an unconvincing victory. There's also those times when the first boss of Dark Souls 3 beat me handily each time I fought him, as well as the one time I got really stuck in Sekiro Shadows Die Twice after an hour or so in. And by the way, these all happened after I had played through Monster Hunter World, thinking that there might be some sort of overlap of learned skills between the two. Skipping ahead to February 1st, 2022, when no reviews of the game were out yet, I could feel the hype for Elden Ring welling up. Conversations surrounding the game increased at a fever pitch, and when I mentioned to my peers that I felt that I wasn't good enough to play the game, many of them extended their hand in aid. This made me pause for a brief moment, thinking about how so many others out there had proclaimed that Git Gud were the only means of enjoying From Software's games. And so, despite my terrible progression in previous FromSoft titles, my seemingly quick dismissal of Elden Ring, a sense of duty to talk about a Bandai Namco game in 2022, and the encouragement of both friends and peers alike, I requested an Elden Ring review code. And many weeks and hours later, I've come to realize that I've been playing one of the best video games of all time. I want to be clear that I don't take these bold proclamations lightly. After writing down that statement, I literally walked away from my computer, went out for a drive, and came back 5 hours later to ruminate on what I'd just written. And sure enough, I still felt the same way. In this video, I will be exploring the multifaceted reasons why Elden Ring belongs in the list of best video games of all time. For folks like me who have either never played a FromSoft game or have merely dabbled in it in the past, I want to share the many ways Elden Ring feels so much more accommodating when compared to FromSoft's previous titles. For fans of the developer's games, I would surmise that nothing I will say in this video will surprise you, though I am hoping to enhance your appreciation of all the games you played by shining a spotlight on the game's director, Hidetaka Miyazaki. Regardless of who you are, my hope for this video is that you'll not only come away with it with an insatiable curiosity and admiration for Elden Ring, but also have a newfound appreciation for what these games have been doing for so long. And to the many fans who have encouraged me to play FromSoft's games for more than a decade now, this video is my love letter to you. But before anything else, I want to quickly point out a few things of note. To start, the Elden Ring gameplay you'll be seeing throughout this video was captured on my Omen 16.1 gaming laptop, running at the highest settings. Since I started working on this video, Elden Ring has been steadily updated to improve its performance on the PC. That being said, my Omen laptop handled the game's performance flawlessly, keeping its frame rate close to the game's hard cap of 60 FPS, despite the way the title was optimized. Second, I set a personal goal of at least reaching and exploring partway through Stormveil Castle before making any video on Elden Ring, as it is widely considered by many longtime fans as the first real challenge of the game. Since setting that goal, I've not only defeated the boss of said castle, but I've also explored much of the lands between, accumulating more than 100 hours of total playtime across the platforms I'm playing the game on. Yes, plural. Third, I spoke with fans and content creators specializing in FromSoft's games over the course of my playthroughs with Elden Ring, many of whom have finished the game already. While third-party information can never be a substitute for actually experiencing a game in its entirety, I do want to put forth said information to make sure that my own preconceived notions aren't delusional, and, by extension, something that will lead you astray. There's also a very, very good reason why I wanted to make this video before I reach the end, which I will talk about later. Lastly, this video is chapter marked for your convenience, though I highly recommend watching it from beginning to end, as I do refer to portions of each chapter throughout, providing a fuller picture thanks to the additional context. Git Gud. Chances are, you probably encountered this slang plenty of times over the past few years. Most are familiar with its more negative connotations, particularly whenever someone uses it as smack talk. But there is one other definition that's less used, one that's more positive, and surprisingly enough, inclusive. In this case, Git Gud is used as a shorthand for investing the time and energy to develop mastery of a game. So you can imagine the apparent confusion whenever anyone interested in From Software's games would approach a fan and ask how they can get into said games, only to be greeted with the words "Git Gud." There is some semblance of truth to this response, of course. After all, FromSoft's titles are unlike any action game out there, even when compared to other games that try to mimic said formula. My personal hurdle, and I suspect many of you who have dabbled in these games, are the various roadblocks that impede your progress. I've already mentioned my own roadblocks, but I'm sure you can come up with your own. While these roadblocks are meant to challenge and teach persistent players the game's mechanics, many of us fall off quickly compared to others. To cite a personal example, I've challenged Father Gascoigne at least once a year since Bloodborne came out, and each time he killed me, I felt defeated and never wanted to push through. So what does this all mean within the context of Elden Ring? In Elden Ring, you don't have to smash your head against this roadblock, as you can completely do something else entirely. With that one seemingly small change, the definitions of success and failure in this genre start to shift. While it is true that you'll have a really tough time with Margit the Fell if you had chosen to walk the Grace's path early on, you're not locked into that encounter at all, save for dropping your runes, the game's currency and experience point pool, upon death. And so what if you drop 2,000 runes? Defeating 2 giants in the open world would easily net you the same amount. While masochistic players might condemn others for running away from these challenges, I choose to instead see this as a way for you to get good, or play better, at your own pace. After all, how could you improve if you're constantly discouraged by a seemingly immovable foe? It's in this sense that Elden Ring is telling players like us that it's okay to come back later, beckoning us instead to explore its massive open world with the hopes that one of the many foes you'll encounter will teach you the fundamentals of its combat. To phrase it differently, your perception of Elden Ring's difficulty will change depending on what you choose to take on. Hardcore players could choose to fight Margit at a lower level and succeed, ensuring that they encounter even tougher foes, while newcomers like us can meander about the world and fight bosses that are significantly less difficult than Margit, allowing us to build up the strength and, more importantly, the courage to come back and defeat the Fell Omen. This isn't to say that FromSoft has compromised and made the game easier, but instead of being stuck for hours on a particular roadblock, you now have much more freedom to experience the game however you see fit, which has the slight side benefit of making tough bosses a tiny bit more manageable. I mention Margit plenty here because I consider him as the very first roadblock of Elden Ring, and there have been many players out there who have tried repeatedly to take down said boss, not knowing that a whole world was waiting for them. This is one of the first lessons Elden Ring will teach you. If you think a boss is too difficult, it's time to get out there and explore. That being said, it's not as though its world, known as the Lands Between, has any shortage of its own perils. This is an open world that won't prevent you from exploring its edges, which means that you might occasionally encounter some tough battles too early. Fortunately, Elden Ring provides you with a horse that lets you ride away from these dangers. And just when you think you've explored its lands thoroughly, Elden Ring stretches its borders even further, obfuscating its actual size by showing you a tiny portion of it at the start. And quite frankly, I'm glad they didn't show everything in the beginning. Modern open-world games give you access to the entire breadth of the experience, littering the map with points of interest that's just begging to be seen. By contrast, Elden Ring doesn't really care if you find all of its nooks and crannies. There have been portions of the map that I thought I'd scouted well, only to find a hidden door behind a boulder or a catacombs entrance hiding beneath a stack of wooden planks. It's in this sense that Elden Ring encourages players to just keep exploring, rewarding your curiosity with dungeons and treasure that pepper the game's landscape. These catacombs, caves, and mines are partly why some players are quick to compare Elden Ring with The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. In the latter, you'll encounter over 100 shrines that either have puzzles or enemy encounters that are served in bite-sized chunks. Elden Ring employs a similar approach to its smaller dungeons, though you're guaranteed to face a tough boss at the end of each, which rewards you with unique and useful items. These bosses, in addition to the many enemies you'll face in the open world, serve as learning tools for players to test their comprehension of Elden Ring's combat. And while you can go to distant graveyards and collect runes, therefore gaining the ability to level up a ton, Elden Ring won't be quick to hand you easy wins by simply overleveling its content. This might all be confusing given the lengths in which I talk about the aforementioned roadblocks and how its exploration affects its difficulty, so I'll speak plainly. By taking a detour from these roadblocks and choosing to explore its world, Elden Ring will serve you just enough monsters and challenges that'll not only help you level up, but also, on a subconscious level, give you the confidence to take on even tougher challenges. This all comes with the hope that Elden Ring has taught you how to play its combat system properly by experiencing what the game offers, rather than being stuck in dialogue boxes and tutorials that merely take you out of the experience of actually playing the game. While much of the discourse surrounding FromSoft's games have mostly revolved around its perceived difficulty, even less discourse can be found talking about the intangible feeling you get when defeating the tough bosses you've encountered. This feeling of accomplishment is at the heart of FromSoft's game design, and surprisingly, this desire of imparting this feeling, as well as emerging from failure, has some very innocent beginnings. The story goes like this. In 2001, a man who goes by the name of Hidetaka Miyazaki was urged by his friends to play a PS2 game called ICO. ICO followed the tale of a young horned outcast who encountered a mysterious girl while exploring a massive castle. By working together, the horned boy and his new friend tackled shadowy monsters and tricksy puzzles in the hopes of finding freedom together. Because of ICO's unwillingness to tutorialize and tell much of its story through lengthy cutscenes, the experience of playing the game reminded Miyazaki of his own childhood, when he'd pieced together stories through a combination of written prose and drawn illustrations that helped form the full picture. It's at this point that he decided to leave a potentially lucrative career in IT to work in video games, and at 29 years old, he took a job at a company called From Software. Miyazaki was eventually put on a project that was stuck in development hell. This project turned into Demon Souls, a game Miyazaki revamped with none of the conveniences of modern games. Players would lose all their hard-earned souls after dying, returning them to the beginning of the area and respawning all of the enemies they'd defeated. At that point in his career, Miyazaki felt that he had nothing to lose. As he said in a recent interview, "If my ideas failed, nobody would care. It was already a failure." In school, I was taught that getting an F in any class was an indication that I had lacked something that my peers had. But as times changed, the very idea of failure became empowering. Fail fast, fail often, as the Silicon Valley adage would say. This is probably why I suspect that Miyazaki's games declare that you died rather than game over. After all, it's not up to him to tell you whether your game is over or not. They're ceding control to you. Miyazaki adds, "In my work, I want to answer the question. If death is to be more than a mark of failure, how do I give it meaning? How do I make death enjoyable?" While Miyazaki uses the words "you died" as a way to reframe the failures you encounter, he is keenly aware that the rest of his design aesthetic evokes much of what he experienced as a child playing the classics of the 8-bit and 16-bit eras. Modern action games let you wail on your opponents with reckless abandon, barely punishing you for your barrage of attacks. Maybe it'll even top the battle off with a QTE or two. Through no fault of their own, playing these games has made me careless, never once thinking about what would happen if enemies slipped in a hit or two, allowing me to just brute force through every fight without a care in the world. By contrast, Elden Ring will punish you for trying to sneak an extra hit in. Even worse, a regular enemy might even catch you in its string of combos, leaving you helpless in its wake. It's easy to be upset by this, of course, but the more I played Elden Ring, the more I understood that I owned all of the decisions I made up until the time of my death. So yes, it was my fault for underestimating the dozen enemies in front of me, charging headfirst into battle, and dying as a result. And while I wouldn't put it past FromSoft to make bosses that feel cheap at times, I am reminded of his team's confession that Miyazaki uses himself as a standard bearer for the difficulty of his games, citing that he's not good at action games at all. Hearing that Miyazaki wasn't good at his games, but is still able to defeat them, led me to really think about the combat loop in Elden Ring, even going so far as to look up how previous FromSoft games handled AI. My thought was that if he's able to defeat all of his games, that there was something missing from my perspective. Then it hit me. Elden Ring is technically a turn-based game, but not in the traditional sense of those words. Elden Ring's combat loop, and all Soulsborne's by extension, alternate offensive and defensive turns between yourself and the AI until one is defeated. You might think of this definition as silly, given how it sounds like it's present in all games, but you can often circumvent this through sheer brute force in other titles. In Elden Ring, learning patterns are crucial in winning battles, so you'll be spending the time to learn what kinds of attacks enemies have, and appropriately take advantage of openings and put on pressure. If you're a hardcore fighting game fan, this concept will sound very familiar to you. Thankfully, Elden Ring is pretty good at showing tells to clue you in on what kind of attack your opponent is about to dish out. This is an overlap with Monster Hunter that I greatly appreciate, but what I discovered was far more curious. Elden Ring does not demand that you have lightning-fast reflexes. Instead, Elden Ring demands that you dodge, block, and attack well. This means no double-tapping buttons to invoke rolls, no mashing of buttons to attack, none of it. This is what everyone means when they say that FromSoft's games want you to be deliberate with your inputs. When I realized that Elden Ring's combat is, in truth, slower than I thought, that's when things started clicking even more. I'm not here to pile on offense like a food processor mixed with a blender. I'm here to react to what's about to happen. And finding those openings and moments, as well as smashing strong enemies with big hits, can be so satisfying that I now understand what the big deal is with FromSoft's games. It also allows folks who don't consider themselves to be good at action games to be good at Elden Ring, as it is, interestingly enough, designed to be much, much more accommodating than its contemporaries. So why is it then that people think of his games as difficult? Miyazaki shed some light on this in a recent interview. I just want as many players as possible to experience the joy that comes from overcoming hardship, adding that, in our games specifically, hardship is what gives meaning to the experience. So it's not something we're willing to abandon at the moment. It's our identity. I believe that Elden Ring manages to accomplish his desire for more people to experience this vision without compromise. Overcoming hardship, or to put it in another way, finding answers to problems, is one of the primary drivers behind Miyazaki's games, which is probably why I'd never call any of his titles co-op games per se, though some of them do allow for some limited multiplayer functionality. Speaking of, I recall being frustrated by how the developer handled multiplayer, wanting to experience many of their games with my wife at my side, only to jump hoops at every opportunity. When taking his design ethos into consideration, it makes sense to limit the amount of help players get in his games. However, there's yet another story I've heard that sheds more light to its design. He tells this tale in an interview he had shortly after Demon's Souls was released in 2009. The origin of that idea is actually due to a personal experience where a car suddenly stopped on a hillside after some heavy snow and started to slip. The car following me also got stuck, and then the one behind it spontaneously bumped into it and started pushing it up the hill. That's it! That's how everyone can get home. Then it was my turn, and everyone started pushing my car up the hill, and I managed to get home safely. But I couldn't stop the car to say thanks to the people who gave me a shove. I'd have just got stuck again if I'd stopped. On the way back home, I wondered whether the last person in the line had made it home, and thought that I would probably never meet the people who had helped me. I thought that maybe if we'd meet in another place, we'd become friends, or maybe we'd just fight. You could probably call it a connection of mutual assistance between transient people. Oddly, that incident will probably linger in my heart for a long time. Simply because it's fleeting, I think it stays with you a lot longer, like the cherry blossoms we Japanese love so much. Because it's a game with a lot of dying in it, surely that kind of fleeting cooperation should come out of all the death. We're all dead, so let's help each other out. One aspect of Miyazaki's games that barely gets any mention is the impact his games have in the gaming community from both inside his games and out. Much like previous FromSoft games, Elden Ring is peppered with messages left by other players, as well as white and red ghosts that show you what other players have done in the area. These fleeting messages and moments are not just reflective of Miyazaki's life experience that one day, but also serve as ways for you to prepare for what's ahead. Deaths reflect ways in which other players have either fallen in battle or foolishly jumped off a ledge that's too high, while ghostly white figures show you the various ways that other players like you have won and succeeded. All of these messages, for the lack of a better word, serves as Elden Ring's way of connecting every one of us together, showing us that we all share in the struggle that its developers have laid out in front of us. But perhaps more interestingly is the effect of FromSoft's games outside of itself. Whenever I'm not in the game, I am constantly talking to fellow players about our personal experiences, talking about our builds, sharing strategies, and what kinds of interesting things we've seen on our journeys. This is, of course, propelled by the sheer size and freedom of exploration we have of the lands between, ensuring that every one of us have our own unique stories to tell. I've never played a FromSoft game as long as I have with Elden Ring, and admittedly, being in the middle of this zeitgeist feels really good. It would be quite the hyperbole to say that playing Elden Ring close to launch feels like a once-in-a-lifetime moment, knowing that much of the discourse will still exist beyond that. But there is something to be said about feeling like you're playing the game alongside others that Elden Ring does so well, despite the lands between being desolate and unforgiving at times. Which actually leads me to talking about its story. I've spoken with many players who have said that one of the reasons why they don't play FromSoft games is due to the lack of a traditional narrative. While Elden Ring certainly doesn't have one, there are multiple ways that it tells its stories. My favorite happens to be the way its stories are told through its environmental and level design. In addition to being gorgeous and filled to the brim with details, the lands between feel as though you've just arrived after something big happened to it. There are whole cities beset by a rot that's claimed its inhabitants, destroyed carriages whose cargo has gone missing, as well as roaming mausoleums with untold secrets hidden within. All of these can be found with their stories inferred merely based on the proximity and the location of different NPCs, landmarks, and places you'll encounter throughout. In fact, I liken this sort of storytelling to, wait for it, visiting Disneyland or Disney World. The lands between isn't so different to Disney's theme parks as you might think. Everything has a reason for being in either world. But Elden Ring even goes so far as to have detailed lore and descriptions for every single item you pick up. While I recognize that the mere idea of deriving the game's story and lore through reading item descriptions won't be everyone's cup of tea, I find that Elden Ring's decision to tell its stories through a combination of locations, item descriptions, and the few moments you interact with its NPCs as a sort of blend of an archaeological activity mixed with detective sleuthing. We're asked by its developers to unravel the mystery of what happened after the Shattering, an event that saw the Elden Ring torn to pieces, creating an imbalance in the lands between. So what about those players who can't piece this all together properly? That's where the community once again comes into play. Whenever there was something that I didn't understand, or perhaps something I missed, I could always talk to anyone playing the game to see if I was understanding things correctly. This is another point towards playing Elden Ring close to its release. Every idea is fresh, and everyone is doing the same thing, so knowledge is readily available. And the more we uncover things together, the better we all understand what's happening and why, sharing in a sense of fulfillment and understanding that permeates across the community. It's because of all of this that I felt the presence of every single person playing Elden Ring, despite much of my experience being lonely and solitary. Whether it's watching someone clumsily fall to their doom, reading the blend of helpful, hilarious, and trolly messages left by other players, or piecing together the narrative outside the game, Elden Ring bucks the idea that you need to be playing alongside others to feel connected to other players. And for those who want to help, or hinder, others, there are ways to do so. But I've never played a game like this that felt so consuming, that it's all I ever want to talk about. I mentioned earlier that I wanted to make this video before I finished Elden Ring, and the reason for that is because I'm still enjoying my time with it. Even after hours in, I still find a lot to take in just meandering about in the lands between, and discovering hidden tombs, treasures, and caverns, while working my way through the tougher areas of the game. I will be treating Elden Ring as my forever game, if you will, riding across the game's vast expanse as I defeat foes left and right, and enact revenge upon bosses that killed me easily early on. It's a game that, strangely enough, can shift from something that would induce panic sweats to something that can be satisfyingly relaxing at times. And after several years of trying and failing to understand FromSoft's games, Elden Ring has helped me realize that there's so much fun to be had in death, thanks to the elegance of the game's design. With over 12 million folks who have played the game already, more than 70% of them having defeated Margit the Fell, and so many more joining us as I speak, Elden Ring is an important gaming touchstone that's propelled FromSoft into the hearts and minds of the mainstream, and it did so without compromise, creating something that, in all honesty, belongs in the pantheon of one of the greatest games of all time.